So now the recording starts, and also this will be transferred now to our YouTube channel, so that after the lecture also everybody can watch the lecture on YouTube on our regional CETA regional Frankfurt channel. Yeah, and that's all. Please stay muted right now and give the space to Rudy, who will say a little bit about this lecture from Christoph.
Okay, thank you, Antje. And hello, everybody. Very pleased so many of you are showing up. From what we see, we reached the maximum number of 100 for this room now. So everybody who wants to join, in addition to this, has a chance to just attend on the YouTube channel, as Antje just said. Well, coming to Christoph Barmeyer, I first would like to remind those of you who have followed this series of webinars of Jürgen Bolton's webinar in April. And a couple of years ago, Jürgen Bolton actually gave a list, I think it was an Intercultural journal, of the topics which he felt were more or less disregarded in intercultural research. And among them, there was one point I found very convincing. That was, where are the success stories? We need to research them too, because we can learn from them. And that triggered lots of memories with me, having spent most of my life in Hamburg, in the southwest of Hamburg, Hamburg-Finkenwerder, where there's a very big Airbus industry plant. I had several friends who worked for Airbus and were regularly commuting to Toulouse, Blagnac. And when we talked about this, they very often said how difficult it was to work with the French. And I sort of heard the French talk about the Germans. And at the same time, it was quite clear Airbus industry is a fantastic success story. It's, after all, #1 among the aircraft manufacturers in the world. So how do they do it, actually, in spite of the difficulties? And the second point, actually, again, my personal experience relates to one of the points which Christoph is going to mention today. Taking the train from Frankfurt to Paris, which I frequently do, it's always a special experience, at least in two senses. First of all, being one of the post-war German generation, I can't help remembering the country we are traveling across in high speed used to be battlegrounds for centuries. And the second is the ease and professionalism with which the service personnel, all of them trilingual, French, German, and Flemish, perform their job. So in spite of it all, you can always ask, they're doing it very well, but how do they do it? And that's one of the interesting things about Christoph's research, because he has focused to a great extent on success stories in cross-border and intercultural cooperation. And that's why I think we all can be very happy he's here. And so we're looking forward to your presentation, Christoph. It's your.
Thank you very much for this very nice presentation, and thank you for organizing, Antje and Rudi. It's really nice. I see a lot of colleagues and ancient students, and I'm very happy that you are here in these difficult Corona times. So at least we can meet a little bit like this. So I'm really very glad that you are here and that I can present some of my research. I'm going to share my screen now with my PowerPoint presentation, and hopefully you can see it. So I would like to, I would like to talk about, of course, intercultural management, and we'll give you some insights from case studies. So first of all, when I look out of my window now, it's dark, but I can see the river you'll see on the left side. This is the University of Passau, and my bureau is based here, my office. So this is a little city in the southeast of Germany, far away from everywhere, but between Prague, Vienna, and Munich. So in some way, we are in the center of Europe. I am the chair of intercultural communication at the University of Passau, and this is my team here. We work on different subjects. So what Rudi Kammerer already said, the constructive intercultural management. We work on transfer and recontextualization in MNCs, also on the integration of migrants, and very recently something we are going to start, it's intercultural and migrant entrepreneurship. How does people who in fact combine different cultural backgrounds, how do they, what is their activity in terms of entrepreneurship? And of course, a very important orientation is this constructive intercultural management, which we defined together with Peter Franklin as the conscious handling of cultural diversities in organizational contexts, which treats this diversity not as disturbing through mutual adaptation and development process, but uses them constructively as enriching and complementary resources. So this is really a sort of attitude, we can say. How do we see intercultural management here? So what I would like to do with you is to have a little introduction on the field and culture and management, and then go into the 3 case studies. I hope there will be time to have an exchange between the participants, you and also me, and then I will finish with a very short conclusion. So first of all, you know, intercultural management is a very fascinating and relevant subject. A lot of you are either scholars or practitioners in this field, and you know, culture is fascinating every day. It's also difficult, and it's also surprising. And especially when we look on research, in my opinion, and this is also what I want to show you with my case studies, is we have to look much more on contextual factors, power, language, history, all these elements. Another thing is, what about dynamic, multiple and hybrid cultures? We still, and I'm part of this, we are still very focused on national cultures and a certain stability. But we have to look more and more on interaction and processes. Cultures are not stable, they are very dynamic. And so these are new research directions, we can say, and therefore we suggest a paradigm shift. We also have, and this is based on Sonja Sackmann's work, and I think she's with us here, we also can see an evolution in the intercultural management research. At the beginning, we were much in this cross-national comparison. So culture is equal the nation state. We then moved much more because of problems, misunderstandings, to intercultural interactions. Culture is something which is socially constructed. And now we are moving much more to the multiple cultures perspective. Culture is a collective, socially constructed phenomenon. And when we look on migrations, on migrants, on bicultural people, more and more in societies, we have the constellation that people have more than one identity. They speak more than one language. They are in fact bicultural, intercultural people. And this is something we have to look at. together with my PhD student, Madeleine Bausch, we did the research in the two most important cross-cultural management journals, Cross-Cultural and Strategic Management and International Journal of Cross-Cultural Management. We looked on over 600 articles on topics, on paradigms, methods. And just to show you what was really interesting was that still quantitative methods are the most important methods. There's qualitative work and mixed methods. And when we look how it evolved over time, so we looked from 2001 to 2080, we can see here the quantitative work, so is still quite dominant. The qualitative work is, yes, as we saw, about 20%, but there was here something rising, and the mixed methods unfortunately declining. So mixed methods is when we combine qualitative and quantitative research. So you see there may be an evolution to more qualitative research, but we don't know, so we have to continue our research here. What we also have is this very problem-oriented view on intercultural management research. So this is also what Rudi Kammerer introduced. And colleagues, Günther Stahl and Rosalie Tung, they looked also, they did a literature review in different journals, and they discovered, in fact, that the problem-focused view on cultural diversity is far dominant. So we don't know a lot about the positive outcomes. We know a lot of the problems and the differences. And the paradigm shift could be to look more on the positive dynamics and the resources we find in cultures and intercultural settings. So to resume, we have different paradigm shifts. One from static towards more linear dynamic concepts of culture. And this is something I want to show, especially in the second and the third case study. So there should be also a move from national cultures towards multiple cultures. So we have to consider the interaction of nation, industry, profession, department, gender. Third, we should move from a decontextualized ethic work to a more contextualized emic work, so much more culture specific. And this is why I think qualitative case studies are very important here. And finally, move a little bit away from the problematic to a constructive interculturality. So case studies are very interesting, either for teaching or for research, because normally they are rooted in context. There's a story, there's a history, they are actors, they are relationships we have to understand. And they also can be very culture specific and emic. We can dive into the context. And this helps us to better understand social phenomena or the specific subjects. Of course, case studies are full of interpretations on the good side and the bad side. But we can also work on the constructive and solution-oriented orientation. So, and now I would like to start with you with a first case study, which is the Italian coffee break. It was one of my favorite subjects. I think you will have some association when you think of Italian coffee and the coffee break, or an Italian bar where you have been drinking a coffee. And the subject was fascinating for me. It happened a lot of time when I was in Italy in the morning. My wife was still sleeping, and I was sitting in a bar, and then the Barmeyer came in, had a cappuccino. Then a professor came in, had a cappuccino. And all sorts of people, really, I would say, from the population, all different levels, all different professions, they came in, they talked, they laughed about the last news, about problems, about something. And I was so fascinating that I thought, this could be a good subject. And I myself, I worked 8 years in France, in Strasbourg, and it took me as a German, a few years to understand that the most important place in my institution in Strasbourg was not the meeting room, but the coffee break, where very spontaneously people came together, had talks and all this. So with a student of mine, we did the research, and I was really, or I'm still very critical about the idea that we can store and share knowledge and information via, in fact, a very structured, formal, abstract, measured, planned tools and instruments. So if you look on the literature, mostly the American literature, then you will find a lot of instruments, tools, how you manage information circulation, how you manage knowledge management. And we all know, in fact, as human beings, that a lot of things are very implicit, that a lot of things are in the process, in the interaction, and that perhaps all these super IT management systems are not very sexy. What is much more sexy is to have a dialogue, to have an exchange with real people. And I think we all feel it now in these Corona times. I'm here in Passau, and at this moment we have to wear masks outside. And all this human exchange, also when we want to get information, give information, to get knowledge, is in fact very, very important. And it is practiced in Roman organizations, in Spain, in France, in Italy, but also in Latin America. So the coffee break represents a special form for emergent and natural information circulation. And that's what I want you to show now in this first case study. So better understand the role played by the coffee break in Italian companies. The research was done by Konstantin Würfel, who was a master student, perfectly able to understand and work in Italy. And we had 3 case studies, 1 bank, 1 learning institute, and 1 subsidiary of a German beauty company. We did interviews and we had observations, hours and sometimes days at the coffee break. So just looking what is happening at the Italian coffee break in these 3 companies. We discovered 8 functions. I will just show you 4 important functions, but they were 8. So a first is I think very clear for everybody, regular information circulation. So you exchange opinions, point of views, you give advices. So this is really something which can help during the work. A third function, this I found very interesting, is that the Italian coffee break is structuring the day. I read you one citation. While most of the time I spend the first break in the morning jointly with my boss, I mostly drink the coffee after lunch with other colleagues, whom I also went to lunch with. For the last coffee in the afternoon, so 3 coffee breaks, I meet with the younger colleagues whom I am socially closest with. So we can already see we have a structuration of time and a structuration concerning the workforce. of course, and this is very amazing also for Germans, it's not just small talk, but it's really discussing problems, concrete problems, and generating solutions. Persons I know better tell me about their problems and observation during the coffee break. This makes the coffee break extremely important to me. And if you remember my introduction, there are different people coming, different hierarchies, functions. It's really in the sense of multiple cultures, and they all contribute something from their point of view. The marketing, the finance, the human resources. The sixth function is reducing hierarchy and establish more personal relationship. So, you know, in Roman cultures, there's a much stronger power distance. It's much more formal. And during the coffee break, it is really a moment of familiarity, of easiness and relaxation. And even the superiors who are there, they take part of this really special moment where relationships are a little bit no more existing. So it's, I remember there's my friend and colleague Vincent Merck in the audience. And when I started my PhD, he wrote an article about interculturality and the sauna. And the sauna also is a place where people are all the same. All hierarchies are gone all of a sudden. And in the Italian coffee break, it's a little bit like this. A seventh function, so of course, it's about networking, communities of knowledge and practice. When somebody is open and does it not always spend their coffee break with colleagues of the same group, it is possible to learn about new things about persons and subjects. So I think this is really something very, very interesting. This possibility to meet people from different departments, which you normally would not meet because you stay in your department. And finally, what we loved, we had, so it's not Zoom like here, but zooming in, zooming out. It's taking a meta level on knowledge and processes of the organization. So people learn about their organization. How is it, how are processes, how are structures organized in the organization? Because you all of a sudden you think outside the box. So eight important functions of the coffee break. They are linked to places and surroundings. They are linked to types of knowledge. They are linked to room change. And of course, very important, the social interaction. So we can see it's, the coffee break can be a very important place for this informal circulation. And it's not static and formalized, codified, but it is really something which is spontaneous, fluent, and personalized. So the coffee break here is a central place in Roman Latin organizations where multiple and various informations are exchanged in cross-department and cross-status fashion. So this is why I think it's a nice subject. We now would like you to be active and to come together with breakout groups of 3 persons and have an exchange of what is your experience of these informal meetings. Are there coffee breaks or tea breaks or smoker breaks or I don't know? And what do you learn from this case study? So, Antje, could you manage the,
yeah,
or shall
I would like
can
to.
do it.
Yeah, but he suggests, I mean, the program suggests 6 to 7 participants, which is not what we want.
6
So,
to 7. Okay.
Yeah, but
I will see.
Because you are a co-host, you could also do it. But I don't know if we get another solution.
Okay.
I don't know why he does.
And yeah, I'm afraid you'll have to do it because we co-hosts can't do it. You are the only one.
No, I see how I can do it.
Yes.
No
yes.
problem.
Okay.
Okay.
So now we go into the breakout rooms with 3 to 4 participants.
That's great.
Okay?
That's great.
And then the time will be, everybody would like to know that. We said 8 minutes, right?
Yes, it's 8 minutes to get to know each other and share your experience of informal knowledge places in your culture.
Yeah, thank you for giving us the question again. Yeah, places for intercultural exchange, informal places in our culture, right?
Can you see? It's still visible or not? My presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
It is visible. So 8 minutes in the breakout rooms, and now I will try to break.
Antje,
yes.
Just in case the chat is disabled, so we may need to use it. So could you please enable the chat?
Enable the chat. Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
That's a very yes. I was even
okay.
No problem.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I realized I was in no breakout room. I was very sorry missing this experience. I hope you had fun because the question was so nice, Christoph. I was thinking about informal rooms where I meet people.
Yeah.
Because I'm, how do you say that in English? Kleinstunternehmer. I'm, self-employed on my own, and where I do meet informal contacts.
Absolutely, yeah.
But there are places.
Yeah.
For example, theater.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It's in a way formal, but there is a lot of informality as well. Yeah. So what I see, we are now 87, and I think we could, there are still some people coming. But anyway, I think you could go on, or you decide yourself right now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Antje. So I hope you had a good time in these breakout rooms, and I was with somebody from Italy and Maurizio somewhere, and he said, "Oh, it's completely normal to me." And I was with a lady from the States and from Germany, where it's a subject. So I would like to come to the next case study, and it's about the French-German TV channel Arte. So if you have those who are in Europe, Arte has been founded for 30 years now by François Mitterrand, a French president, and Helmut Kohl, the German chancellor. And they exist now for 30 years and produce an interesting TV program. I had the pleasure to work with Arte for many, many years as a consultant, but also as a trainer. And together with my French colleague, Eric Davoine, we did about 30 interviews and observations in the Arte organization. And I would like share some of our findings with you. So when we look on the classical background of culture and intercultural management, we have often these oppositions between a stable culture and a dynamic culture. Cultures are homogeneous, they have historical tradition, they have national institutions, educational systems, law, and also these enduring value systems. So if you look on what is happening in Corona times now, we clearly see some elements of this. We see national behaviors which are very distinct when you look on Asian countries, European countries, the state. So it may be interesting to look on stable aspects of culture. Here the metaphor is culture as an onion, you know, the model of Gerd Hofstede. On the other side, we have a dynamic aspect approach of culture. Culture is dynamic, is constructed. It's also by increasing internationalization, migration, there is a strong multicultural element. And there's no classical national management style, but hybrid management style. And Tony Fang is using the metaphor of an ocean. So it's fluid. So two opposites we have, and we suggest that we should not see them as opposites, but merge them, combine them in a multi-paradigmatic way. So of course, social systems are rooted temporally and spatially in a context, but nevertheless, they shift, they move, and they transform. We are all actors of our cultures, and we all transform cultures and cultural setting. So here the metaphor is an ice pack, changing, cold, warm, more liquid, more stable. So let's try to find a new metaphor when we think about intercultural management. And I would show you this by the example of the case study of Artes, you know, the binational European TV channel. The objective of Arte is to conceive, arrange television programs of cultural and international character, and very important to promote understanding and rapprochement between peoples of Europe. So there's really a mission here. And what is really interesting, there are hundreds of French and German managers, employees, working together. So I don't know how many organizations you know, but it's really a binational organization. It's not just the headquarters and subsidiaries, but they work together. They have to fight, to exchange arguments, to set goals, to communicate, to cooperate, to make the TV work. And the worst thing for somebody working at the TV is that there's a problem, that there's a black. So it has to be always, there has to be something which works. So interesting, the workforce at Arte, 63% are women, only 37% are men, 72 are French and 24 are German, and there are some percentage Belgium and other nationalities. So we find in our research really some elements of stable approaches of culture. We looked especially on middle managers, so managers who are in between top managers and employee. And in France, we had this very strong hierarchical distance. You have these French words, superior, patron, cadre, and they use n-1 and n+1 to show or to make clear where are you or myself in the hierarchy. n+1 is, so I'm over n, I'm over. Whereas in the German conception, or the people we interviewed, it's a very slow power distance, and you have these German words Führungskraft, Kollege, and Mitarbeiter. So the Mitarbeiter in English is the co-worker. So it's really the idea of participation. And on the German side, we have a very consensual decision-making process and a high participation of the subordinates, whereas the French managers practiced a very, well, a decision-making process with much less consultation. We had the more personal aspect in the French management, like in the Italian coffee break, and much more structured in the German conception of a manager. By the way, if you enter Arte in Strasbourg, you have a big hall, and on the right side, the most important place is the bar. And you go there, drink your coffee in the morning, and you see other colleagues. And the German said to me, I had to learn not to work directly into my office, but take 10 or 15 minutes to have a coffee with my French colleagues. So this was the classical stable approaches of culture we know. But what was more interesting, in fact, was the dynamic approaches of culture. And we had a lot of cases where the German adapted to the French. When you work with the French, you have to be aware of the subtext and the non-relational dimension. So very clearly, the Germans were conscious that the informal and personal elements play a big role. Here, so it's a German, no, it's a German female manager. If I need to talk to a person about something longer or more complex, if cafeteria for lunch. So all of a sudden, the Germans learned that informal places are also good places to discuss work subjects. Now we have a French quotation here. My leadership styles come from the confrontations with my German colleagues. The approach that I learned at my French business school was the model of the enlightened despot who can solve every problem. And then my German colleagues told me, wait, you should listen and also listen to our view. So here we see an adaptation. The middle managers adapted their behavior towards the other. A second element, much more interesting, is hybridization. It's a construction of a new culture. Everybody adapts, everybody learns from each other. Here a French quotation. We had to develop an own way of making our job, of writing our texts, and in-between solution, which takes into consideration the two groups, the French and the German group. We then have another French quotation here. There's a specific language at Arte because there are German words that we use when we speak French among we French. It is also amusing to see that there are German words that have been Frenchized and vice versa. So Arte developed an own cultural corporate speech, which is very difficult from people coming from the outside, from the French televisions or the German televisions. A lot of things they don't understand because over decades, Arte has in fact co-constructed a language and working practices. A German middle manager said, we drill deeper. We question much more than a national company does. And that's why new things always come into being. And if you look on the Arte program, I don't know if you watch Arte, but you can feel this creativity, you can feel this innovation they offer with their TV program, and this comes much from the hybridization. Finally, it's quite stimulating. It forces us to find a third way and somewhere to find creativity. So we can see in this case, we have the coexistence of a stable and dynamic approach of culture. So the functionally stable approach is, in fact, that there are typical French-German differences rooted in history, in institutions, but we also have this culture dynamic approach, and working practices are constructed in the moment by negotiation processes. Are we going to talk in German or in French? Are we going to prepare the project like this? So they are constantly negotiating work practices. And finally, we have, and this is very important, I would plead to this multi-paradigmatic approach that we try to consider and respect each approach, but try to combine them, because we can learn from every approach, and every approach has his raison d'être, his reason to exist. So, my dear Theatarians, we had the idea to have a chat, to have a dialogue, and an exchange. So let's try to have an exchange.
And could you say a little bit more specific about your expectations?
Well, everything which comes in. I mean, perhaps, yes, staying on this idea of hybridization, developing new solutions, practices. Perhaps you have examples of concerning this.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward. So
Barbara is raising her hand.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Rudy. Thanks a lot, Christoph. It was a tremendous, I really enjoyed a lot the insights on your cases. I wanted just to share that we had with Peter, Stephanie, and Adrian, a very nice conversation in the group where we're comparing Germany, Austria, and Spain and Britain. And I was mentioning the case of a very nice German startup. It's called Mystery Minds. And what they do is they group up in a mystery way, like in a random way, employees in an organization to pair them up for a mystery lunch, a mystery coffee, or a mystery brainstorming. I'm going to post that as well again into the chat here, because the whole idea is, of course, to get rid of silo thinking and problems in this case. And for example, what we found, or what the founders told me, because I interviewed them and I'm in touch with them, that for example, in Britain, mystery lunch doesn't work because nobody goes for lunch. So they had to adapt the product, and they started with a mystery coffee. And in Spain, it is not that, because they asked me, or I asked them whether we can do something in Spain. And they told me in Spain, honestly, they always go for coffee, no need to organize that. Mm-hmm. And that's really fun, because it was a very interesting conversation I had with them. And I'm going to post that as well, because they have also the mystery brainstorming idea is lovely, so that you don't only brainstorm with your team, but according to certain criteria, you can say like, I want to come up with a different team. And I think maybe Peter or maybe Adrian, you want to add something of the situation in the UK where you were saying that nobody goes for lunch anymore, or a majority, a big number of people don't go for lunch, so there is no exchange, and there might be even more silo thinking than before. That was just sort of a summary of what we were discussing.
Thank you, great, very interesting, Barbara. And you posted the link for my mystery coffee. Great, yeah.
I have a question, if I may.
Of course.
Christoph, I worked in several European projects in which Germans and French, among others, were involved, and some of them failed drastically. And today it would be my explanation, we just didn't get on with one another. And one of the reasons why we didn't get on with one another are different turn-taking routines. So the French kept interrupting me all the time, because I'm from Hamburg. We're used to standing stiff and allowing someone else come into the discussion. And if you interrupt me twice, I'll never talk to you again. And I think you're an arrogant idiot. And I'm sure my French colleagues in this field thought I was a boring old fart. I didn't contribute. They had to present the whole show. So looking back at it from today, I know that we didn't pay enough attention on relationship building through communication, etc., etc. So coming back to your example of Arte, I would be interested whether you found anything about the methods. How do they establish a mutual sense of one company, of one team, etc.? Do they have routines in doing this?
It's a very, very, very good question, of course, and it also shows your example not only to establish social relations, but to have a certain knowledge of the other culture. So in France, it's completely normal. It's even positively associated if you interrupt another person, because you show that the subject is interesting and that you have something to say. So it's really the opposite of the meaning what we have in Germany, especially in the north of Germany. And so the knowledge, the cognitive aspect is also very important. And the interculturalists here, I mean, this is something we work on when we talk about intercultural competence. I still think we have we need some knowledge, and then we can de-dramatize conflicts. There are some companies, and Arte is part of it. They did intercultural preparations. They had seminars. I did myself. I worked on leadership with binational groups. But it's, you know, culture is a difficult subject. And there were some middle managers saying, oh, I'm against stereotypes. And you are saying now the French and the German. And then we had a role play, and it happened exactly as you described it, Rudi. There were interruptions from the French side. And at this time, we did a film with the camera and showed it then to the French people. And this was something really very, very important. So and what we have, like always, we have in the Arte organization people who are very conscious of cultural differences, and others who are not. And they will find other explanations. It is power, it is language, it is the market, it is the audience. And I think still I have no clue and no key to convince these people. But yeah. Okay.
Yeah, very interesting question. I see Sareen at this moment. She wants to contribute, and then I would really like to go to the question from Cynthia. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Christoph. We had a very interesting little chat in our small room. I have a question really, which is what movements are afoot in your research and the wider fields where you have influence to have more ethnographic and narrative approaches in research? I mean, these are well regarded in feminist approaches typically, and so that's the orientation where I'm coming from, for greater inclusivity and voices and all of that. What are your views?
What are my views? What are my views?
Yeah, to increase.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think this is, I think, a main message. I mean, and this is what I wanted to show at the beginning. We are in research, it's still very quantitative, ethic research, not looking on context, comparing instead of looking on interactions. And I think observation is very important, ethnographic methods. I love case studies because you can much better understand social phenomena. So it's a culture sensitive research. And I think this may be something which will emerge. There will be a new handbook by Guttormsen and Lauring next year. And it's about exactly these research methods, doing culturally sensitive research. It's feminist, it's post-colonial, it's critical, it's interpretive, and to get more deeper in what is really happening in the case. But still, we have to look on academic logics. I tell my PhD students, do this. This is original research. But you know, the community perhaps will not appreciate this. They want to have a much more rational or rationalized research. But when we really look on research, there's nothing new the last years. So if we use new methods, we will always have new results.
One thing, I'm going back to Cynthia now. She's asking, Arte, perhaps some of the communication success has to do with the female majority. And I would like to add, Christoph, I was thinking the same when I saw the numbers like 63%. But when we are talking about this, like it's because of the female majority, what is that it's? Is it again this old story which we are told all the time that we are so social? Or is it maybe also bravery and courage and, you know, interest and being curious? What is your experience in that?
I think it's a question we could debate during all night, and we will not find an answer. I think it's a very, very interesting question. And once again, it is also linked to the stable and dynamic approach of culture. What is happening at Arte? There are multiple cultures. We have French, German. We have women, majority men. We also have functional cultures. They are journalists. So journalists are a very special kind of people. They are curious, they find solutions, they go everywhere, they question, so it's really interesting. And we also have all the management, the human resources, logistics, finance. And I assisted 10, 15 years ago when they did, I don't know how you call it in English, it was really offene Tür.
Open door?
The journalists went in the HR department, and the HR department went into the studio where they do the filming. So this was really, really interesting to exchange and to learn from departments. And I would say, yes, the success has something to do with this. We can try the success.
Christoph, your sound is, very unstable.
And let us work with the difference. And Arte, in some way, they have to work together because they're in the same office. They have the objective to do a quality European TV channel. So they have to work together.
Yes, thank you. Perhaps we're all looking forward to the third case study you are going to present.
Absolutely.
I mentioned my personal reason to learn more about it when I introduced you.
Great. Yes. And
can I add something? No. Okay.
Vincent?
Can I still add something?
Of course.
Okay. No, I have a little experience.
I recognized your voice.
Sorry?
I recognized your voice.
Yeah. Thank you, Christoph. Just a little bit of our own experience. I have a little bit of experience with Arte and also with TV5 Monde, the French-speaking association of French-speaking countries and in this consortium of TV. And I think that's what you were saying is interesting because there's very much the professional culture, which is very important here. That's why they work together. Same as TV5 Monde, it works as long as the politics keep away. Because they are professionals, they started from scratch, they are highly regarded by one another, and that really helps. So I think we cannot compare that to other, other industrial mergers or acquisition, whatever. I think that's very specific of the audiovisual, the communication, journalism, and I think that's as long as the politics, I think, keep away, that works. Yeah. That's my experience as well.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Vincent. I think this is really the idea of case studies, of qualitative case studies. We have to look on context. If this would be a pharmaceutical company, it could be completely different. So I think this is really, really very important. And this brings me to my next and last case study, which is about the French-German high-speed trains. And what was really amazing, we discovered a little bit the same culture as with the journalists. Because people are very proud in the train sector, they love their work, they do train spotting. So it is really interesting. It has to do something with the corporate culture here. So this is the third and last case, which in some way is for me the most amusing case. You will see the stable culture approach and the dynamic approach, and it's very technical. So once again, this is research I did with my French colleague, Eric Davoine, and this is very important also for the research process. Also, if you do ethnographic research, you have to know the language, you have to know the context. I'm also actively teaching in other contexts, for example, in Turkey and the German-Turkish University. And all my colleagues ask me, Christoph, why don't you do research in the Turkish-German context? And they say, I don't speak Turkish. And I think it's really very important in qualitative research. If you want to go deep into the case, you have to have a good knowledge of the language. And this is what I do with Eric. He's French, but perfect in German. I'm German and fluent in French. And we can combine our two point of views here. So a very interesting concept was introduced by Marioko Brannan. It's called negotiated culture. It came from a case study from Japanese-German paper production in Düsseldorf. And Brannan did, I think, a PhD or a research on this subject. And she was looking how new working culture emerged and how people negotiated between cultural groups. And here the idea is that meaning is not just transfer, but recreated by social action. When we talk together, when we work together, we express ourselves verbally, non-verbally, and it's a sort of negotiation process. What do I say? What is understand, etc. What is interesting in this case study, so it's an ethnographic case study. Mario Brannan is a cultural anthropologist, and it takes into account the context and also ambiguity. And it takes into account reciprocal learning. I think this is very important because we all learn, and actors and organizations learn from each other. And of course, there are new forms of organizations and also competences that help to manage these complex intercultural organizations. And Mario Brannan proposes this model. So there's the cultures of origin here in red and in blue. And we have a range of assumptions, values, which we import into a working group. This is our culture. And then we have the context here, the organizational events. There are structural influences, power relations, majority, minority. We have individual influences. We are no robots, but we are individuals. And then we have special issues, quality, price, market approach, how to manage human resources. And then we have to negotiate, how do we do it? Do we do it the German or the Japanese way? Are we going to do it the business administration way or the engineering way, and so on? So a very interesting concept. So now comes the case. Aleo. Aleo is a joint venture from the Deutsche Bahn and SNCF with headquarters in Saarbrücken and Strasbourg. And you can see here, if you go from Stuttgart to Paris or from Frankfurt to Marseille, you are using the services of Aleo. You will not see the name because unfortunately the name is hidden, but Aleo is this joint venture. It's very little, only 12 employees, but they coordinate over 200 German, French, and employees. And of course, these organizations are very big organizations. More than 100,000 people on the German side, more than 100,000 people on the French side, so real bureaucracies. And then there's this little startup, this French-German startup, Aleo, a joint venture, and responsible for a lot of innovation because they have now to make a high-speed train run between two countries. And we discovered it is very, very complicated because the systems are so different. In France, the trains went on the left side, on the left side. If you are in Paris, you can see it when you take the RER. In Germany, trains run on the right side. And I will show you some differences here. We have, in fact, the trains are different. There's Siemens in Germany and Alstom in France. It's a completely different technical train. And by the way, with a lot of advantages on the French side, especially talking about fiabilité in French, robustness, the air condition. So some Germans know that when it's very hot, the air condition doesn't function anymore in Germany, which is not the case in France. So a lot of technical things which are different. Also, I suggest to you once take the train from Stuttgart to Paris or Strasbourg to Paris. It goes 320, 350 kilometers. It's really, you are flying. It's amazing. In Germany, the maximum speed is like this. And this is also because of political reasons. In France, we are centralistic. In Germany, we are federalistic. And in Germany, the high-speed train has to stop at a lot of towns and Bundesländer, whereas in France, you can have a train going from Aix-en-Provence to Paris, 850 kilometers in 3 hours, because it runs very, very quick and it will not stop. So we have different conceptions of service, of transport. Those who are familiar with E.T. Hall and explicit implicit communication, it's really much more implicit in France, even from the outside. I took the photo, so if you want to find your place, it's much easier in Germany. The big deception of the Germans is, oh, we are going to Paris and with the TGV, and then they will discover that there's no restaurant. So big deception, but there's just a sort of bar, and there's some Kit Kat and Coca-Cola. And in Germany, we are used to sit down, to have real dishes. In France, it's plastic. And so there's a big deception from the German side, not finding the French way of living here. And what is really a big, big difference, in Germany, you can have a ticket or not. You can buy a ticket even in the high-speed train when you are on board. And in France, it can be very expensive. So it can cost 375 euros if you have no ticket. Also, the advertising is different. The German way, very factual. So here we have a laptop like mine, and Frankfurt, Amsterdam, 4 hours, Frankfurt, Paris, 3 hours and a half. Frankfurt, 33 emails, 6 SMS, 4 phone calls, and a Boeuf Bourguignon, which is a very famous play. In France, the advertising was like this. Germany from 29 euros. It's a moment to look behind your stereotypes. And so this is Frankfurt. No, this is Bavaria, of course. But there are also young people here. And this was advertising which was particularly appreciated by the French, but not by the Germans. So you have the German Wurst here, and this was for Frankfurt, which is, the Frankfurter is a Wurst, a sausage. And the same idea, look behind, there are great museums in Frankfurt. So what I wanted to make clear that we have two national systems with a completely different conception of service, of technique, of speed, of ticket prices. And now, because it will be one company, it will be Europe, you know how you now have to find a solution. How can we, in fact, harmonize these very, very different things? So, and we were asking once again, what are practices that emerge, especially in this idea of negotiated culture? And are there some factors which help the development of synergistic practices? So some findings. And it was really important. The director of Aleo was a person who loved France. He speaks French. He was really quite bicultural. And this is, of course, very important for a director of a binational company. And he says, our motto is the best of both cultures. We have passengers from both nationalities on board, or even more. French sit next to Germans. Why should we not have the same common approach in our teams? And you are going to see later how they resolved, how they created this common approach. And in terms of negotiated culture, so as I already said, the situation was that the Germans considered the gastronomic service in France as very poor. And also they required a beer dispensing system. And so the solution was in the French high-speed trains that during some periods, for example, Christmas, there was the beer dispensing system installed. Then there was the question of hygiene standards. The solution was found to package. And of course, what was interesting also, that the German had a very, very long time to plan their meetings. And this may have has an effect on prices in Germany, but in France it has. So here we have to adapt also the style. There has been always a thorough preparation by Aleo in form of PowerPoint diagrams and charts, because this was already fixed in advance. Everybody can prepare for the meeting and go through this roadmap. It reduced any ambiguities. So here the French, in fact, learned from the German that it's good to prepare a meeting days before, weeks before, and send the PowerPoints before. What the French learned what the Germans learned from the French was, I'm going to read you, my German interlocuteur and I tried to understand which subjects could hurt the partner, and we neutralized them before by preparing both sides for the potential difficulties. So in fact, it was the case in a lot of subjects that the French way was to, in a strategic way, to talk to people before and prendre la temperature, feel the temperature, and to prepare the meeting when there was a difficult subject. And the German learned to do it the same and not just bringing the subject first in the meeting. What is even more interesting is innovation by both groups. And one big problem was that there were two national reservation systems. And this is something extremely confidential because it's all about money. It's all about personal data. It's incredible. I mean, reservation systems, and the systems are completely different. So Aleo, the little Aleo, 12 people decided to centralize the system with a reservation system. So if you book as a client, you can book in France or in Germany, and it all will be in a centralized system. And it's just one person, and of course, a lot of software doing this. Also, what they did is to have a joint service in the train. It was a problem when a French person not speaking German or perhaps not speaking English asked a question, and the German could not answer. So if you go on board, you will have bilingual train attendants. And what is really, really nice, I'm going to come back to this, bicultural pairs, tandems, always one German and always one French working together. And these are the binational pairs. And what they say, it's really interesting. We are finding new and better solutions based on our experience in national rail systems that fit in both systems. And what is really interesting, there is innovation in this little joint venture, which then is brought to the big SNCF in France and the big Deutsche Bahn in Germany. It's really innovation here. On board the trains, the DB SNCF train attendants complement and support each other. The product is usually accompanied by a customer assessment that is much more positive than usual, because the customers can address the attendants in their mother tongue. So I'm nearly finished with this case, and I would like to show you our, in fact, factors that support the emergence of this negotiated culture. And first, what we saw last are these binational pairs, these tandems. And we had this a little bit in Arte, in Airbus, that you have a German and a French counterpart working together. They share central resources. They create trust. So for me, really for us, these binational pairs are very, very important. And of course, it costs money. And the business administration view is, oh, it's too expensive. But of course, the real added value is that you have these two persons working together and bringing in their competences. A second supporting factors are boundary spanners. These are people, mediators, they translate, they explain different point of views. And I could assist, and this is for Zareen, I assisted at meetings at the Gare de l'Est, the French railway station in Paris, the East. It was 3, 4, 5 hours of meetings, and they took place in German and in French, no English, like in Arte, French and German. And it was translated. And it takes some time, but it is very precise. It is very clear. Because in the train system, we have to do with security, high-speed train. So you have to be very, very precise. And the boundary spanners were in fact the people who translated and also translated culture.
So Christoph, may I ask you something? Yeah. We got very short in time, and people have to leave sometimes. So I just have to tell you, that we are over time.
I'm finished. You can see it's all about intercultural learning and development also. Good. So, any more questions?
For the last 10 minutes. Yeah, please. Barry, yeah. Can you unmute yourself, Barry?
Unmuting myself would be very helpful.
Great.
Apologies for that. What is interesting, it's a very interesting presentation, and looking at the notion of a constructive paradigm, which was actually also put forward a little bit by Milton Bennett in a previous CIETAR seminar. One of the key issues that we all face in the UK, in Western Europe, everywhere, is this whole notion of huge numbers of immigrants, Turkey into Germany, but also Syria, etc., as you've mentioned. And we know that immigrants have been the greatest contributors to the development of culture and society in most of the places they've worked and lived over the centuries. However, we're experiencing difficulties now, simply in terms of processing and also accepting. How do you see the constructive paradigm can really work to help immigrants earn their place in the society in the way that you've talked about feminization, for example?
Yeah,
That's the question.
yeah. Thank you. I think it's a very, very important question, and I think we as interculturalists, we have a certain task, a certain responsibility to think like this. And by the way, in a few minutes, I'm going to meet Syrian migrants, incredibly integrated in Germany, and talking in German, perfect German, and I am really looking for constructive examples, because what we read in the media, what we hear, it's also it's catastrophic. And the people who integrate, and I have a lot of well, they are skilled migrants they, from Syria, but it's incredible their intercultural competence. And I think we have to look on best practices, good practices, and we can use our intercultural attitudes of non-judgment and understanding and explaining.
Mm-hmm.
I presented the people of my chair, and Martina Malecki, she works a lot with the Chamber of Commerce. She does a lot of activities. How can we integrate migrants by working by the workplace? Mm. So I think and once again here, we should learn from each other, from what are good practices in Great Britain, in Switzerland, and I have a research team, and we try to learn from Sweden, from France, from Germany, and I think this is a big and important subject, and I'm sure we cannot close our frontiers, but now we have to do something, but something important, and it's not enough just to give language courses. We have to act, and the whole society has to act if we don't want to explode. And Barry, it's a big subject.
If you take your just a very quick one, if you take your constructive viewpoint and the positive angle, these people, very well educated in many cases, huge talent, huge ability, very brave, they've got here in the first place. How can we help them utilize those talents to really benefit society and themselves? And it seems to me the research your team is doing in this area is going to be very good if it focuses on that area.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I may take this up, Christoph and Barry. I think the example of Aleo is for me a very, very good one, because this shows that you have to professionalize this integration process. People who actually focus on it and deal with it 7 days a week. And that is perhaps the most important message from your case studies, Christoph, today, that it doesn't come naturally and automatically, spontaneously. We have to work on it. And that's my understanding of constructivist approach. We construct our realities, and interculturalists have a special duty in this. I think we need to close the room very soon, or otherwise Zoom will throw us all out. No? Okay, Antje, so it's yours. You need to unmute yourself. Anyway, thank you very much, Christoph. I very much, and we very much appreciate these examples of your qualitative research. And I think that's a very, very important keyword, which I found needs to be more and deeply discussed within CHR2. What are the advantages and disadvantages of quantitative and qualitative research? So your example were excellent, I found, because they refer to real life, not to statistics.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
May I say something? You know, I realized as a typical German that I was always looking for the yes, but in your examples. And then I remembered that you, you know, officially invited us for seeing success stories. And that was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Antje. Yes.
I think
Yeah.
Antje started with our ritual as greeting each other. Our ritual of saying goodbye is please unmute yourself and wave and then say thank you, etc.
Yeah.
That's
Thank you
how.
very much.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Very much.
Thank you so much.
Au revoir.
Okay,
Au revoir.
goodbye.
Au revoir, Christophe.